This lesson is about how to find the percent of a number. In this lesson, students will be able to find out how much a given percent is of a number. Let's start with the basics of what we already know about percents. This picture that you see with the blue squares is a 100s grid, and 43 of those squares are shaded. So 43 out of 100 is our fraction, and we know that percent is always out of 100. So whenever you hear a percent for a test or anything, that tells you, let's say I got 78% on a test, that tells you I got 78 questions correct for every 100. That doesn't mean there has to be 100 questions on the test, however. So we're going to look at some different ways, other ways to look at percent now. So like I said, percent's not always going to, or a number's not always going to be out of 100, but we can still find out what the percent would be. So here's one example. Down here we have 50 grid blocks instead of 100, and 20 of those blocks are shaded. So what percent would we say of those blocks are shaded? Well, we can figure that out by using what we know about proportions. So if we have 20 out of 50 blocks are shaded, and I want to know what percent that is, or what number out of 100. So we just set up a proportion of the part that is shaded out of our whole, so 20 out of 50, and set that equal to what percent is that out of 100. In this example, we can go very nice and easily from 50 to 100. That's simply times 2 times 2. And then we can see that our answer would be 40%. So 40% of the 50 blocks are shaded. We can use proportions to answer this question as well. How many blocks would I shade if I wanted to shade 25%? Let's set up a proportion. So again, our percent here is going to be 25%. So we're going to write 25 over 100. And again, we have a total of 50 blocks. So here we want to know how many blocks out of 50 is going to be equal to 25 over 100, or 25%. Again, we'll do times 2. Actually, since we want to go this way, remember, always go towards your x. To get from 100 to 50, we're going to divide by 2. So we'll divide this by 2, and x would actually equal half of 25, which is going to be equal to 12.5. So if I wanted to shade 25%, then I would shade 12.5 blocks. All right, let's move on. So let's just start with the basics here. And here is our proportion, and this will work for any percent problem. We have part over whole equals percent out of 100. So you can have any of these pieces missing. The part, the whole, the percent, 100 will always be there. And you can figure out that part, that missing part, based on having the other three pieces. Just a clue of when you read a story problem, what is the part and what is the whole? The word is a key word, tells you that the part is being described. If you see the keyword of, that's describing the whole. You'll see what I mean as we go. So we're going to start with just some basic percent problems. How do I find the percent of a number? All right, so here we go. If I want to know 105% of 80, I'm going to do 105, which is my percent, over 100. Of 80, remember, of is our whole. So if you want to think about those grids, the whole number of blocks in the grid. So what is 105 of 80? So we're going to put our x, this is our missing piece, the part of the whole. So what we need to do now is create a proportion and go ahead and solve it. Now I can't nicely do the side to side or the up and down. So I am going to need to do the cross product. So 100 times x, we get 100x. And then 80 times 105, I'm going to use my calculator. And I get 8,400. Then I simply divide by 100 on both sides. And you can see that x is equal to 84. Now, usually the part is less than the whole. In this case, however, since it's 105%, it's actually going to be more than the whole. So our answer is 84. Let's try another one. All right, 13% of 66. So of 66, 66 is our part. We want to know what is 13% of 66 gumballs. How many gumballs would that be? All right, so this will be my x. That's what I'm trying to figure out. And so we have 100x, 100 times x is going to be equal to 66 times 13, which I will do on my calculator. And I get 858. Again, we're just going to divide by 100 to both sides. And I will get 8.58. Now, this will you can speed this up if you can recognize that when you divide by 100, remember in the number 858, our decimal is right here. Every time I divide by 100, I am moving the decimal to the left 2 times. So that will save you some time once you can remember that. And it's okay for us to have a decimal. All right, let's try another one. The next problem asks, what is 51% of 445? So percent goes on top of 100. We want to know 51% of 445. That's our whole. And we want to know what is our part 51% of 445. So again, notice it's 100x each time for this type of problem equals 445 times 51. I'm using my calculator for this, and I get 22695. So 22,695. I'm going to divide by 100. You can do that on your calculator, or you can just move your decimal over twice, and we get 226.95. Let's try one more of these. What is 98% of 72? So 72 is our whole. What is? So our question is the is, which is our part, 98%. So again, 100x is 72 times 98, and that equals 7,056. And we will simply divide by 100 so that we can get x by itself. I will move my decimal over twice, and x equals 70.56. So 70.56 is 98% of 72. All right, I'd like you to pause the video and try the rest of these problems on your scratch paper, and then unpause to see how you did. All right, so go ahead and check your answers. If you made a mistake, then just pause the video and try it again. All right, let's try some story problems. Members of the drama club sold t-shirts for their upcoming musical. Of the 80 t-shirts sold, 55% were size medium. How many of the t-shirts sold were size medium? So let's underline our important parts here. And notice I see the word of the 80 t-shirts, 55%. So let's fill in our missing pieces. Percent is always our ratio out of 100. Of the 80 sold, so 80 is our whole. That's the total number of t-shirts. we want to know how many were size medium. So of all the t-shirts, only some of them were medium. Let's figure out how many. All right, so let's go ahead and solve as we did on the last page. 100x is going to be equal to 80 times 55. Again, if you do not have a calculator, be sure to get one. And that equals 4,400. Divide by 100, divide by 100. And x is going to be equal to 44. Let's answer that with our label, however. How many t-shirts were medium? And I'm going to say 44 t-shirts were medium. So 44 is 55% of 80. And now using estimation, that does make sense because 50% of 80 would be half, which should be 40. 55% is just a little bit more than that, and 44 is a little bit more than 40. So estimation is a great way to see if you're on the right track. Let's try another one. Tamara collects porcelain dolls. Of the 24 that she has, 25% have blonde hair. How many of her dolls have blonde hair? So first we see that percent. So that is our ratio out of 100, 25 out of 100. Of the 24 that she has total, that is our whole. So her total collection of dolls is 24 dolls, if you want to think of this as your whole. And then some of those have blonde hair, but not all of them. So that is our part. So let's go ahead and solve and see how many out of 24 is equal to 25 out of 100. So we'll do 100x equals 24 times 25, and that's equal to 600. Divide by 100 to both sides, and x is equal to 6. So let's answer that in a complete sentence. 6 dolls have blonde hair. Next problem. Mr. Green has a garden. Of the 40 seeds that he planted, 35% were vegetable. How many vegetable seeds did he plant? So again, let's pretend that this is the 40 seeds that he planted. And the problem is telling us that some of those were vegetable seeds. So let's fill in part over a whole equals percent out of 100. I can see my percent right here, which is 35%. So 35 out of 100 of the 40. So of, that is my whole. Some of those, x, were vegetable. Let's find out how many. So 100 times x is equal to 40 times 35, which is 1400. And we'll simply divide both sides by 100. So x is equal to 14. 14 is 35% of 40. 35% is a little less than 50. Half of 40 would be 20, and 14 is a little bit less than 20, so our estimating makes sense. So to answer this question, how many vegetable seeds did he plant? I would answer he planted 14 vegetable seeds. All right, let's move on to a little bit of a challenge for those of you that are ready. In 6th grade, the standard is simply to find the percent of a number, which is what we were practicing. But if you wanted that extension into 7th grade and 8th grade percents, now instead of the part always being our missing piece, which is what we did, x was always here in all the problems that we've done so far, now it might be in a different spot, or it might be a two-step problem. So let's take a look at a couple challenging ones. If what we've done so far is enough for you, you can feel free to stop the video. But I would encourage you to keep watching. Kevin has mowed 40% of the lawn. If he has been mowing for 20 minutes, how long will it take him to mow the rest of the lawn. So the first thing I want to know is 20 minutes is, so 20 minutes is part. So let's just draw a little diagram to help us understand. If this is the total number of minutes to mow the whole lawn, and he has done about 40%, right? And it's taken him 20 minutes. So 20 minutes is going to be the part, not the whole. We know our percent. He spent 20 minutes, and it's 40% of the lawn. So how long then would it take to do the entire lawn? Now, we can do a side-to-side relationship here, so that's nice. We always go towards the x. So to get from 40 to 20, we'll divide by 2. 100 to x, we will also divide by 2, and x will be equal to 50. So it will take 50 minutes to mow the entire lawn. But let's get back to what the question is. How long will it take him to mow the rest of the lawn? So 50 is not actually our answer. If 50 minutes to do the whole lawn minus the 20 minutes that he's already spent, then it will take an additional 30 minutes to finish the lawn. So you really had to think about that one. If your head's a little jumbled on if it's a part, if this is a part or a whole, drawing a diagram is extremely helpful with that. Let's try another challenge. Maggie ordered a painting. She paid 30% of the total cost when she ordered it, and she will pay the remaining amount when it is delivered. If she paid $15, how much does she owe? This is a very similar problem. So we know she's paid 30%. We know that the amount she's paid is $15. So I know she hasn't paid all of it, so that $15 is going to actually be the part, not the whole. And 30% is our ratio of 30 out of 100. So let's figure out the whole amount that she owes. So we can do a side-to-side relationship here as well. From 30 to 15 is divide by 2, so we will divide by 2 here as well. So it looks like she owes $50 total. She's paid 15. We would have to really look at what the question asks. How much more does she owe, not what does she owe total? So if the total is $50, we're going to subtract the $15 she's already paid, and then I can see that she owes an additional $35. So that was a two-step problem and challenging, but if we just take our time and pull out that important information, we're good to go. Let's do just one more. Okay, I lied. Two more. I have to work a 12-hour a day. So far, I've worked for 8 hours. What percent of my workday have I completed so far? So notice after the word what, after our question word is percent. So that is actually going to be my x this time. So I'm going to put my x as my percent, my number over 100. So what do I know? I know that I have to work a 12-hour day. That looks like that's my whole work day. So we're going to put that on the bottom. So far I've done 8. That's the part of my day that I've worked, and I want to know what percent is that. Side to side, up and down doesn't work so hot here, so let's go ahead and do crisscross. 12x is equal to 800. We are going to divide by 12, divide by 12. So I will use my calculator to do 800 divided by 12, and that is equal to 66.6 repeating. So we know that 0.6 repeating is equal to 2/3. Just memorize that. So the answer to my question would be, I have worked 66.2% of my day. Okay, remember our x is here, and that this is our percent. Last problem. 12 is 20% of how many strawberries? Here we really see the is and the of. Is over of equals percent out of 100. So 12 is, that is going to be my part. 20%, that is my ratio over 100 of how many? Well, that how many, that's my x. So the of or the whole is my x here. Side to side, not so much, but how about we do the up and down? How do I get from 20 to 100? That's times 5. So 12 to x times 5 as well, and x equals 60. So if I have 12 strawberries, that's 20% of how many? It is 12% of 60 strawberries. All right, hopefully this helped you out a little bit more of how to find the percent of a number and then how to extend into that 7th and 8th grade. Good luck.